This is Hellbrent for Leather, and you're watching Cast in the Act. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Cast in the Act. I got a cool one for you today. I don't get much guests on since it's still an early and budding show, but I do have a guy on who I referenced on the last episode that I did. When I was in the Netherlands, I had the wonderful opportunity to hang out with a guy named Henri Serton, who was there from the beginning of the new wave of British heavy metal and such, hitting basically every shore it could. But he was there at the beginning with the founding of the Dynamo Hard Rock Cafe, and has his fingers in many different historical elements of metal in the Eindhoven area and probably even greater areas of the Netherlands as a ripple effect. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring him on. Henri, how's it going?
Brent, it's going great. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm happy to have you on. The conversations and such that we had when I was over there were a blast, and you were very informative. So I'm looking forward to getting some of that today and kind of being able to tell the larger story of why the Dutch metal scene matters so much, and why what kind of makes Eindhoven such a special city too. Because, everybody and their brothers recorded a live album at either the Dynamo Club or Dynamo Open Air or whatever. So let's get started. So who are you and kind of where were you in all of this?
Well, my name is Henri Serton. I was born in Eindhoven in 1958, the 11th of October. I just had my birthday, 67 I've become. Born and raised, born and bred. I love Eindhoven. It's Eindhoven rock city for me, surely. And I grew up there. And in the second half of the 70s, I discovered the hard rock movement, hard rock music, bands like Judas Priest and UFO and Scorpions and Deep Purple. Led Zeppelin was my gateway to all this. I heard A Whole Lotta Love back in 1969, 70, and I was completely taken by it. But I wasn't then old enough to buy my own records. So when I was old enough to buy my own records, which was in the second half of the 70s, I started buying them, and I discovered my all-time favorite guitarist, Michael Schenker, who has a unique fusion of speed and melody, and still has, by the way. So that's what it all started for me. And
I know quite a few people that's been able to catch him on this Michael Schenker Does UFO tour, and it's been nothing but rave reviews. Unfortunately, he didn't come here, so I didn't get to see it. But I would have liked to, because I've never been able to see Michael live. Yeah,
well, it's amazing. He's in his early 70s, and he's still so fast and melodic, and still being able to play the solos from his UFO time, which are his favorite solo period for me, because he wrote out every note of his lead guitar parts when he was in UFO. After that, he didn't do it anymore, and his solos became a bit less interesting for me.
I just saw a great video that I sent to my buddy Will earlier of Tommy Aldridge playing Bark at the Moon at 74 years old and not missing a beat. I mean, he is an animal. So I love seeing these guys well into their 70s that are still just killing it. They haven't slowed down a bit.
Incredible how they do that. But the thing is, why UFO and bands like Scorpions and Judas Priest are so important is to realize that the hard rock scene and hard rock music as a genre, in England and Western Europe and America, where it mostly was known and popular, was going through a very bad period, because it was looked down to by the journalistic rock class, and it was labeled as music for Neanderthals, stupid music, abrasive, loud, who wants to listen to that? to that noise. It was hated. And when you told people that you're into hard rock music, people looked down on you, especially if you had the long hair like I did. And I remember having girlfriends and never meeting their fathers, never meeting their parents, because the girlfriends in question didn't dare, to introduce me to their parents. I couldn't get into bars because I was refused at the door. I told you that
Yeah.
you were an outcast in those days. And fortunately, there were 2 or 3 bars where we were welcomed, and there was a very good import shop in Eindhoven. We were so lucky to have that import shop. It's called Bullet. It was on Church Street. It was right across the Katrina Church. And it was a very small job, but they imported everything we needed. So there were times when I walked in and the owner of the record shop just put down 4 or 5 albums on for me. He said, "Henry, here is this week. This is for you." And I bought so many albums per week that when I didn't like an album, I could return it.
Yeah, I had a situation similar to that in my hometown. There was, and I say it's still there, a record store called Low Yo-Yo Stuff, which was named after a Captain Beefheart song.
Oh yeah.
And I started going there when I was in high school, and it got to the point where I could go in and Jeremy would be like, "All right, I know you, I know your taste. We just got this in. Listen to this." So that's how I discovered like Stormtroopers of Death. And that's partially how I discovered Annihilator and stuff like that. But you were talking about returning stuff. That's unheard of, to be able to return something to a record store that you buy. But you said you had done it.
And this was very valuable to us. I later realized that this was rather unique to the Netherlands, that we could listen to an album before buying it. So there was this corner with couches you could sit on, and on the wall there were these things where you could hang on a headphone, and they had numbers, and then they had record players in the store with numbers, and then it's on number 4, and then you walk to headphone number 4, and you could listen to the complete album for an hour or longer when needed.
Yeah, so, there's some record stores here kind of do that thing too. It's pretty rare. It's definitely not common.
In the 80s and the late 70s?
No, I'm talking about currently.
Yeah, I get that, but we had this in the late 70s, and what this meant, and this is a thing that has always been one of my primary motivations, and that is first to discover new bands, new music. It felt like I was hunting, really searching, fanatical, devoted to discovering new bands, because to me, discovering new bands and buying their albums and going to their concert was supporting the scene and keeping the scene alive. I realized that at a very early stage that supporting new upcoming bands meant keeping the scene alive, infusing new blood into the scene, which is needed very, very badly. So while listening to Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, in those days, I'm talking 1977, 78, I also supported as much as I could Riot and Yesterday and Today. They were called Yesterday and Today before they called themselves Y&T. Max Webster, Early Rush, Triumph. I hunted down, and this 2 or 3 times a week, they had a special place where they set down new albums that were released just this week, and I spent hours and hours looking for new albums and especially new bands. So in '79, when the new wave of British heavy metal erupted, out of nowhere, mind you, I remember on a night we had this very small transistor radio, very small, but it could receive the BBC. And I was on the dial looking for the BBC, and I found it. And then I heard the first notes of a song, which later turned out to be Stand Up and Be Counted from Saxon.
Nice.
And that was the first time I was introduced in '79, late '79, early 1980, to the new wave of British heavy metal. And that's when I also heard the term. And I started to discover that there is something going on in the UK called the New Wave of British Heavy Metal. And I thought to myself, wow, I have to be there. I have to discover this. So what I did is, in the train station, Eindhoven Central, you've seen it, there was this shop where they sold all kinds of magazines, also international magazines, Wall Street Journal and you name it. And they sold a magazine there called Sounds. And
yeah, there's a copy of the Thunderstick cover of Sounds on eBay right now that I might have to wind up picking up, because you don't see that very often.
Yes, and what I didn't know at the time, but the whole term New Wave British Heavy Metal was coined by a journalist, a rock journalist working for Sounds. So while the Dutch on radio and the Dutch journalistic rock journalists looked down on hard rock and metal, they did everything they could to degrade it. The journalists of Sounds were trying to write about it in more neutral terms, and they just found it an interesting phenomenon, and they realized that there was a crowd for this kind of music, this phenomenon, this musical phenomenon, this wave, and they probably think we can sell magazines because of this, and so they started promoting it. And that's where I learned. And around the same time, there was one Dutch magazine, music paper, Muziekkrant Oor, which was formed as a paper. It was this big, and you can fold it like this, fold it like a real newspaper. And again, most of the time, there was they looked down on hard rock and metal, but there was one guy who was working there, Kees Baars, and he knew everything there is to know about early hard rock and metal bands. And through him, I got to know Judas Priest and Scorpions, and he introduced me to Rush with a very huge interview where they talked about the inspiration for the lyrics, and this interested me right from the bat, so I became a huge Rush fan. Anyway, building on these two sources of information, I went to Bullet, the import record shop, and I started asking them, can you get these bands for me? And
now to interrupt a little bit, I know that what do you call people from Eindhoven? Are they Eindhovians? Eindhovenaren.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of tape trading going on then, or were you able to pretty much find everything you needed at Bullet?
Well, yes and no. There was some tape trading going on, but that really started in the early 80s, and I am now 79, 80. So that tape trading is going to play an essential part, or rather the young guys compared to me, that they did tape trading because of financial reason. They couldn't buy all the records, so they went tape trading. They will play an essential role in a later development.
Okay.
So I started to ask him to import all those new wave British heavy metal bands, and one of my favorites, for instance, Total Wet Sprocket, One Glass of Whiskey. Don't know if you know the single, but
I don't know the single, but I'm familiar with the band because of the Metal from Others compilation.
Yeah, you have to listen to the single. It's on YouTube. It's absolutely fantastic.
Okay.
Reach for the Sky and One Glass of Whiskey. It's a new wave British heavy metal classic, and they were Rush fans. The bands were Rush fans, and I bought the single because the guitarist had a Rush T-shirt so on the sleeve. So that's how I made my decisions in those times, and I never regretted it because fantastic. Anyway, I really got deep into the scene, and I remember that in 1980, Judas Priest, they had just released
1980 would have been British Steel.
That's right. And just before their performance, I invited all my friends. And before that, even, I had people I'd known in my neighborhood. They were also into hard rock and metal. And they told me, yeah, there's a guy living a few streets from here, and he is just as fanatical and absolutist in his devotion to hard rock and heavy metal as you. And he would probably know even more about the scene. And I said, well, that's kind of hard to believe because I thought myself to be pretty knowledgeable. And they gave me his address, and one time I had nothing to do on a day, and his name was Michael, and I thought, why don't I just go and visit him? I don't know him, he doesn't know me, but it doesn't matter. I just walk in. That's how I was in these days. Now I wouldn't do that, but then I was young and I didn't care. So I rang on the bell at the front door, and his sister opened the door and said, "Hello, I'm coming for Michael." And I just walked through the door. "Where is Michael?" "He's upstairs in his own room." I just walked in. I walked in, what later turned out to be the first meeting of the people who would start magazine Art Shock, the Dutch metal magazine. So there was Stefan Royakkers, Michel van Moosdijk, and Michel van Rijswijk, who later came to be known as Metal Mike, because van Rijswijk was difficult to translate and to explain to English and Americans. So he started calling himself Metal Mike, not to, be kind of special or something like that, because it was pragmatic, the decision on his side.
Sure.
And I just walked in, I sat down, and they were talking, and I started talking with them. And after a while, the meeting was over. I've been there for an hour, maybe longer. I knew nobody I never seen anybody who was there, and they had never seen me. And the meeting was over, and I left. And then Mike said, "Who the hell was that guy?" He really knew a lot. And then he asked to the friends that knew me, and they told him I had a Judas Priest party. And then he said, "Well, if he's here coming unannounced on my first meeting for Art Shock, then I'm coming unannounced on his Judas Priest party." And so he did. And so he had a great time. We had a great time. And then we went together to the Judas Priest gig with Saxon as support act. And that was the first time I met Mel Mike, just at the very beginning, starting Art Shock. And he went to the UK on regular basis, one every 3 months, and he used to bring new singles. I remember that he, if not induced, Do Not Vomiting from Budgie, the EP he brought for me, and I didn't ask for it. He just did it, and we started to go to gigs, to Accept, to Raven, and we went to gigs 3 or 4 times in a week. So what would happen? And sometimes in Germany, and we stay out all night until the early morning. So I would come back from a gig at say 7:30 in the morning, and then I would make myself some bread, get on my bike, and go to my work without having any sleep. And that would happen 2 or 3 times, sometimes 4 times a week. And I got to know John Gallagher and Mike Gallagher of Raven. I got to know a lot of bands because sometimes there were interviews, but sometimes we just hang out with people of Accept. I got to know him very well. And Mike used to have a gig where he played the newest hard rock and metal in a small town near Eindhoven in a bar. And that would turn up about 150 people to hear him play. He would introduce that, he would announce that in Art Shock, and then people would come. And I used to tell him all the time, we should have a hard rock and metal cafe in Eindhoven. Why don't we have it? But there was a youth center, a subsidized youth center, subsidized by the state and the local authorities. And that subsidized youth center was meant for groups of youth that didn't have their own home, that were somewhat marginalized in daily life, didn't have their own thing.
Now, what was the thinking behind that? Was it to give them a place to go where they weren't out on the street causing trouble and so on and so forth, potentially? Or
because one of those groups was the so-called Rocking Rebels, also known as the Elvis Gang, and they used to knife down people. So they were some heavy dudes, and they were teddy boys, as they are known in the UK. They were rock and rollers, 50s rock and rollers.
Sure.
And they had a home there in the cellar. And so one of those youth guys invited Raven to play at the Dynamo. I didn't go to that gig. I didn't know of it or couldn't go any. I don't know. Yeah, that's the Dynamo, the old Dynamo. That's the entrance, the head entrance you see there.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, Ilya was his name. invited Raven, and it drew 400, 500 people, and there was a great atmosphere. Raven in those days were fucking crazy. They jumped and they rolled and they did everything on stage. I've never, to this day, seen a live band as energetic and wild on stage as Raven. They were absolutely crazy.
I've never been able to see them, and that bums me out. I'm hoping that that everything gets better health wise and such, and they can get back out there, because I would really like to see Raven.
John Gallagher is one of the nicest people you could meet.
I've heard that from multiple people.
Yeah, he is absolutely great, and they were absolutely funny. One of the most sympathetic band members I ever met, and I met a few.
Well, it's hilarious. Before I got truly into the new wave of British heavy metal, outside of like Diamond Head, I knew who Diamond Head was because of Metallica's Garage Inc., but I hadn't really dived into the subgenre so much yet. I went for years thinking that Creator's cover of Lambs to the Slaughter was an original Creator song, and I was like, this rules. And then I'm listening to Raven's first album one day, and that comes on, and I was like, why did they cover Creator? And I'm like, no, this predates that by a lot. Holy shit, Creator covered them. And then I fell in love with Raven and was like, all right. So, and that was part of the catalyst for me really diving into the new wave of British heavy metal. Was I was like, okay, if Raven and Diamond Head exists and they're kind of the flag bearers for this movement, then, and I know Saxon's great, this movement's got to be really something to pay attention to. So I really started diving into stuff, and that's how I found Satan. I already knew Blitzkrieg a little bit from Garage Inc., but that's how I found Satan and Angel Witch and everything else. And yeah, it became my favorite subgenre by many miles. I love the new wave of British heavy metal.
I love the new wave of British heavy metal, and the reason I love it, or one of the big reasons, is because it's organic, which means you have these bands, they play more live than they made albums. They sometimes didn't make any albums at all. Yeah. And in the studio, they didn't have much money. So what you hear is what happened. It's raw, it's original, it's organic, it's real. Like, there are so many. Savage, Let It Loose. Do you know that album?
Yep, I have it.
Yeah, that sound of that album, the way it's produced, it's like you're hearing a live gig. I absolutely love that. I'm just a huge fan of. That's one of the reasons I'm such a huge fan of the new wave of British heavy metal. And the same goes for hard rock, especially lesser known hard rock in the second half of the 70s. That raw sound, that original raw sound, also by American and Canadian bands, is absolutely fantastic.
But yeah, I'll take a moment here just to kind of divert slightly. You know, a band that you mentioned earlier was Max Webster. I'd never heard of them before you talked to me about them when I was visiting you in Eindhoven. Yeah. And it's funny, my buddy who I was telling you about, who's a massive Zappa fan, he had never heard of them either. So I turned him on to them here within the last few weeks. So if anybody out there is a big Zappa fan or a big Rush fan, they're kind of a mixture of the two without being too much one or the other. And that's not really fair to them to say that they are a mixture of the two. But if you could put a label on them, that would probably be the closest one you could put. But yeah, just a wild band. And it's not as you told me, it's not a guy, it's a band. Max Webster is not a person. So
yeah, right. Yeah. The Canadian hard rock scene from 1975 to 82 is very, very Moxie, also a great band. Nobody heard of them, and
I've heard of them, but I know nothing about them.
Check them out, especially the first three albums. When Buzz Sherman was the singer, he died in a motor accident, but absolutely fantastic. There are so many good bands. Trooper, the first album. Now, you know, of course, Beck, Turner, and Overdrive, but especially their second or third album, Not Fragile, is an absolute stunner. Great. Triumph, of course. So Godot. There are so many good hard rock bands from the second half of the century. Canada was just blooming with great bands. You wanted to say something. I see it on your face.
Triumph was a band I was never able to get into. Okay. Triumph and Y&T, two bands that you mentioned earlier. I was never able to get into either of them. I don't dislike them, but they just didn't grab me like so many others have.
Did you hear the third album of Y&T, Earthshaker?
If I have, it's been years.
You should give it a try. I think you will be blown away.
Okay.
So back to the story.
Yes.
Um,
So you had said that the new wave of British heavy metal, there were so many bands that just weren't even putting anything out, but yet they were still getting a presence, being able to play live, or maybe they did put out one EP, but it sounded very raw and live. And that's what you liked about it was, there wasn't always the budget, but there was the hunger and they truly wanted to do something.
Passion. It's not the fashion, it's the passion.
Yeah.
And I like the raw quality of the production because of shortage of money. And I think that's a good thing because it sounds organic, it sounds live, it sounds real.
Yes.
So I was fully immersed in that. And in the meanwhile, I was starting to write for Artshock, interviewing bands, giving live reviews, and of course, album reviews, which I really love to do. And Mike had this aside, this where he played the music in a small pub, in a small cafe in Deurne, which is a very small town nearby Eindhoven. And Ilya had just invited Raven and was very enthusiastic at what he saw. And he was thinking, I never see those people in bars in Eindhoven. Where are they? Couldn't we give them a home? Couldn't we give them a place? And in order to do that, he needed volunteers because it's not paid work, standing behind the bar, playing the music, organizing the concerts. So he had to reach out. He didn't have many contacts in the hard rock and metal world, but he knew there was in Eindhoven there was a magazine, Artshock, and so he contacted Mike, and he asked Mike, "Would you know people who were willing to do that?" So the next day, I'm with Mike. We are talking and sitting in his car. By the way, we're sitting opposite of the Dynamo, probably thought out by Mike. And he said, "I have something to tell you. Those guys there in the Dynamo, they want to start a hard rock cafe. Would you be interested?" And I said nothing to him. I just opened the car door, walked into the Dynamo, said, "Is Ilya here?" Because Mike told me it was Ilya who wanted to do this. And I met Ilya and said, "Listen, I can arrange this, no problem." So what I did, and here comes the trade teething scene, and this is 1981, right? And yes. I knew 3 guys in that were regularly meeting in a Bullet, the record shop, the import record shop, and they would talk for hours about this tape, and this band released this tape, and I bought this tape, and they were completely up to date with the scene. They knew almost all the bands. And this is exactly what I wanted, because I envisioned Dynamo as a catalyst for promoting new bands so that the scene would get new blood and the young bands would get a chance to play here, and especially the unknown bands. So I would play Rainbow and Rush and Motorhead, of course, but I would certainly also play a lot of new wave of British heavy metal. And this was all my intention. So, and I walked to Bullet, and there they were. They were Stefan Royakkers. He was an editor for Artshock, working there. And there was André Verhuizen. And there was André Matos. And they were all 18, 17, 16, 15 years old. They were very young. I was a bit older. I was 2 years older. And I picked André Verhuizen because he knew the most. And he was very active, very dedicated, very sincere in his devotion to the new British heavy metal and the demo trade trading scene. So I walked up to him. I pulled on his shirt like this. I remember he had a denim shirt, a denim jacket. And I said, "Come, we are going to start a hard rock cafe." "Of course we are not," I said. He said, "Yes, because you will start and book bands. All the bands you are talking about now, you can book at the Dynamo Club. Concerts. You want to do that?" And he was very willing and able to do that. So we walked back and we went to the Stratham's End. Is, for the people who don't know, is a street in the center of Eindhoven. And it's about 2 miles long. Is that a good guess, Brent?
I don't know. I didn't walk the entire length of it.
2.5 malls with 90% pubs, and in between them some shawarma stores and some food shops.
Sure.
And
is that the street that the Jack is on and such?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yep.
And they were open until 4 o'clock in the night, and you could drink, and there wasn't much restriction on it. So, and we would go out looking for long-haired hard rockers who could, stand behind the bar and serve our customers. And we found, I think, 5 or 6 people, which was more than enough. And this was done within 35, 45 minutes since I left the Dynamo, saying that I would find the people. And then we went back, we introduced, we talked about it. And then in the first week of May 1981, the first evening of the Dynamo Hard Rock Club, Hard Rock Cafe, was opened. First, not in the cellar, as we will see later, but rather, could you show the main entrance of the old Dynamo again?
Oh,
the first picture you showed?
Yeah, I removed it because I thought we were done with it. So let me re-add it. I will do the bigger picture. So
that's fine.
Here we go.
Yes, you can see the stairs. So you walk up the stairs and the orange doors, you go in and then you walk straight ahead. And then at the back, there was a door to the left behind the stair that would go down the stairs to the cellar. And you can see the corner, the left corner. And the wall is until where the entrance begins. That is the hall. You can see on the left side that the building is rather large. That is how big the hall was, and we had a stage there, and that is where we held our normal hard rock or metal evenings, and then later on, André Verhuizen would book bands there. So, now
let me ask you this, just for my own curiosity, since I've been there. Yes. The Dynamo Club, as it stands now, is a replacement building that was built, like 21 years ago? Is that what it is?
2004, 2005, 2006, in that era, because I wasn't in Eindhoven then. So I wasn't there when it was being built.
Sure. So the front, if you're looking at the building, the front left corner, is that where the corner of the Dynamo building is now, or is it moved from there slightly, or?
It moved there slightly. It's been more forward to the rest of the other building. This was more apart.
Okay.
But the whole left front corner you see here is where the concert hall is, and is also how large the concert hall is, which was pretty large. There could be 550, 600 people. Then you could breathe a bit hard, but 550, 600 people could be pressed in there. And on occasionally it would be like when Anvil played there, and Testament and Exodus, it was filled to the brim with people.
So whereas now the Dynamo Club is pretty sizable, and I believe that you've told me that Dynamo Open Air doesn't exist anymore, that they do the Dynamo Metal Fest, but that's done inside, correct? That's
not inside. That's in a completely other location.
Oh, okay. So it's not in the Dynamo.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, but Dynamo Open Air, if I remember correctly from what you said, used to be held behind this Dynamo building where there are now apartments, correct?
That is absolutely correct. It is on the right side of the picture where you see the crane.
Mm-hmm.
There was a huge parking place, and the first few editions of the Dynamo Open Air Festival were held there. But that's for later. I just first finished. Because the first evening, the people of the Dynamo, the youth center, they were kind of a little, not Ilya, but the others were kind of sneering, we expect to be 10, 12 people. So during the first night, one of those people came to have a look, and they said, well, are it, because I said, no, there will be 50, 60. And he said, are there 50, 60? Expecting to hear me say, no, there are, 20, 30. I said, no, there are not 50. But he smiled, said, no, there are 150. Above the music. It was a great success. So after that, Andre started booking bands at the Dynamo Club, and first very small band nearby. One of the first bands was the Belgian band Crossfire. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
They might be on that Crash Bang Wallop compilation that I bought at the record store that you took me to.
Yeah, they are. I saw them. Yes, okay. You're right. Yeah, I've forgotten that. By the way, the first song ever played at the Dynamo Hard Rock Cafe, which is an indication of my purpose, which I played, was Am I Evil from Diamond Head from my own album, which I ordered through Sounds.
That is...
I paid the band, and the band sent it to me.
Was it signed?
No, it wasn't signed, but it was a white album. It was on the white label, on their own label.
Yeah, so the outer jacket was white. Were the labels white, or did it have Diamond Head Happy Face Records?
No, it was white.
Okay, I have 2 copies of that.
It was around February 1980 that I bought it. February, March 1980, somewhere in that region.
That sounds right, because I think it came out in February.
Yeah.
I have 2 copies of that. I've got one that's signed by Brian and Colin, and I've got one that's signed by Sean. Unfortunately, the Duncan autograph eludes me, but I did make up for it because I found this fully signed press photo I found that's signed by all 4.
Oh, great.
So I had to get that, but a fully signed copy with white labels just sold on eBay for somewhere less than £500, and I'm not happy about it because each of mine are worth that, and neither one of them have Duncan's autograph Duncan's autograph. So I wish I would have had an opportunity to sell both of those and scoop that one up and make a profit, but unfortunately I didn't. So it will continue to elude me. One of these days, I will have a white album that will have all 4 of them on it, because it's my favorite new wave of British heavy metal album, and it's not even close. It's the album that brought me to the ball.
Yeah, it's been hugely influential, especially for later bands outside of the new wave British heavy metal, as you well know, of course. We don't have to mention that certain bands that covered them and made them even more known.
Hey, that's why I found out about the whole movement, is because of them.
Yeah, and which, by the way, still is paying the bills for Brian Tedler.
Brian said he never had to get a day job once that album came out.
So that's good. But anyway, Andre started booking bands, and among them new waves of British heavy metal bands, amongst them Satan, and we had some sort of a deal, Andre and me, which was that me and 2 other DJs would be playing bands that he would be booking within the coming weeks, and we just threw those bands out there. I remember playing Oppression all the time, still my favorite Satan number, and Kiss of Death, of course. And we kept on playing so that people know who Satan was, and people would come and, what is this? This sounds really good. Yeah, that's Satan, new wave British heavy metal. They're going to be playing in a few weeks. Really? So through word of mouth, people would come from Belgium and Germany and all the villages around Eindhoven as well, because especially in the villages around Eindhoven, there were a lot of metalheads.
And remind me, because I'm not super knowledgeable about Dutch geography, but Eindhoven is kind of central to the country, correct?
No. It's in the southeast of the.
Oh, is it that far south towards Belgium then?
Yeah, it's very near Belgium, and
okay. I thought it was still a couple hours away from Belgium.
No, half an hour with the
car. Wow, okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. And it's about 30 minutes, 45 minutes with car that you're in Germany.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't realize it was that close to either.
We're pretty near, but within an hour you can be in Frankfurt.
Okay.
So that's how it's located generally. So there were a lot of people from Germany, Belgium, and especially also around the surrounding villages. There are a lot of mediums and small villages patterned around Eindhoven.
Where from Eindhoven, where is like Deventer? I know again? It's Deventer, Deventer, Deventer. Yeah. Where is that? That's northeast from Eindhoven, correct?
Northwest, I think. But no, northeast. You're right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I when I was over there, I had to go out to Locum, and I went through Deventer to get there, and
Yeah,
so I know Locum was way to the east. So
yeah, right. So Satan, Raven. I have to think really hard to. What are they? Deep Machine. Deep Machine had a legendary gig at Eindhoven. Jaguar played two times.
all
Also,
right, who did you say? Deep Machine?
Deep Machine. Yeah,
I don't know them.
they were absolutely fantastic. And
Hmm. I know
Andy
Jaguar, obviously. I know Satan and Raven. I don't know Deep Machine.
Brighton, and he played at the Super Session,
Okay,
which we come later.
Deep Machine. Found them. Okay, I'm gonna keep that tabbed so I can look into that. I don't know them.
Yeah. Andy Wrighton was very influenced by Randy Rhoads, by the way. Andy Wrighton, fantastic guitarist. It's a shame that somebody, such a talented guitarist, has not made it. I believe Wrighton later moved on to Tokyo Blade, but I'm not sure because never was a huge fan of Tokyo Blade, so I didn't follow them too closely. Anyways,
Andy Wrighton, the bass player.
no, the guitarist.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Because Andy Wrighton was in Tokyo Blade.
Then I'm mixing up names. Well, after 40 years, who can blame me? Hopefully nobody.
I don't see anybody else in the band with the last name Wrighton. I just
Maybe
see Andy.
from guitar to bass might be possible. I don't know. But look at Deep Machine. I'm pretty sure there's something to find there.
I will. And Kevin Hayborn was in Deep Machine. He did guitars 81 to 82.
Okay.
Huh. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to look into these guys. All right, cool. I love finding new stuff, or new to me rather. So I will absolutely look into them. And it looks like that there were some compilation, well, maybe not compilations, but they didn't put out their first full-length album until 2014. But there are a bunch of demos, and there's
Our demos are really famous, wanted also in the demo scene, and because of that strength, and again, André Verhuizen, with his knowledge of the demo scene, was able to pick out really great bands. I mean, there were bands I didn't hear of, nobody has heard of, and he put them on, and they were just killing the place, absolutely killing the place, and everybody loved it. I mean, it became when Andre booked the band, most of the people who were coming regular to our shows just bought tickets because they trusted on his name. And that's what I told you in Eindhoven also. I mean, I feel that I just gave a push to what was happening at the Dynamo. I started it up together with Andre, the two of us. But it was Andre that was doing the hard work, and all I did was, playing the relevant bands, which was a few hours every Saturday.
You put the keys in the ignition and turned the car on, and then somebody else put it in gear and hit the gas.
The Dynamo, great, and especially after 5 years, from 81 to 86, Andre set up the first Dynamo Air Festival. And this was to celebrate the 5-year existence of the Dynamo, of the Dynamo Hard Rock Cafe.
Actually, I'm going to stop you for just 1 second, because now I have an extreme curiosity, and we're going to see if I can make this work in real time. If I can't, then I will send it to you otherwise later. But I'm curious because I've got a Satan boot on video from Dynamo Open Air.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to see if, here we go. Well, I have two. I don't know if this is the right one, so give me just a second. I got to see if this is. Okay. I'm going to start this over, and I'm going to share this screen, and I'm going to see if it will work. Because I want to see if this is who you're talking about. All right, I'm going to hit play. Tell me if this is Andre.
Oh, he's making the announcement.
Yes.
This is I think the first Dynamo Open Air. Indeed.
This, hold that thought. This is September 7th, 1986.
86. That's the first one.
All right. Is that Andre there then in the blue shirt?
Brent, 81, 86, 5 years. The Dynamo Open Air was meant to celebrate the 5-year existence of the Dynamo House Rock Cafe. That's how it started.
The guy there in the blue shirt, is that Andre making the announcement, or is that someone else you think?
I can't hear what he is saying. He looks like him, but I can't be completely sure.
Oh, did you not get any audio from that?
Just a little bit, and mostly crowd.
Ah, okay.
No, sorry, I can't say if it's him.
All right, fair enough. I just figured I would ask. I was curious.
I have sent you a few pictures also from Handicapped, and you can see him there.
Okay, yeah. It unfortunately with that, it's the resolution's not very good because it was done on a camcorder that was not great technology, and it's probably several generations of tape.
Technology of the time.
It's a great set, though. It's a great set. I've watched it and enjoyed it thoroughly. So.
Yeah, it's no surprise that Serton was invited for the very first Dynamo Open Air, one of the first bands Andre thought of, because they were so liked, if not loved, by the Eindhoven metal crowd. And what we could see was they were starting to evolve this metal scene in Eindhoven and surroundings. People were starting up bands. In the meanwhile, there were still Archok, who was still writing for it. And Archok grew bigger and bigger and bigger. In the mid 80s, it became a serious magazine with colored pictures and glossy, and the level of professionalism went up really good. So, and at around 85, I decided not to write for Archok anymore, because I had other interests as well and other things playing in my life. So I did that. So I took some distance from Archok, but I still was DJ at the Dynamo Club every Saturday.
Yeah, and you had said about how Serton fit into the crowd pretty well there at the Dynamo and in Eindhoven and such. I know that they felt the same affinity for the Dutch as a whole, specifically Eindhoven. Just that sheet that I brought you, that I had the duplicate of, the Dutch Bash press release, where they were talking about being able to come back to the Netherlands, and then it was talking about this show here, which is the first Serton show outside of the UK.
Yes.
It's actually the first true Serton concert at an actual concert venue, whereas before they were just playing little bars in the UK and such. But yeah.
And also in that time, the lines between the crowd, the public, the fans, and the band were really short. We used to go out together. And after a show, members of the band who were first, being the star on stage, would walk in the Dynamo Club, have a beer, talk with the people there, their friends. We used to go out on the Stratham's End together. This happened also with people from Testament, Merciful Fate. Merciful Fate played 3 or 4 times at the Dynamo Club.
Yep.
And they were almost like a house band. And Andre always knew how to promote bands. So he was telling the most insane stories about the band, how King Diamond slaughtered a chicken in his bathtub because the band was staying at his place, at Andre's place. And he would then tell that King Diamond slaughtered a chicken in his bathtub and things like that. And the fans just ate it up. And they were all, freaked out for the concert, and they expected everything to happen. And they were always packed to the last centimeter, our Dynamo hall.
We don't have to go into extreme detail, but was Andre's house where you almost got into a fight with a certain famous drummer?
Oh yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. Afterwards, I'm happy it didn't happen, but I was really steamed. But anyway, I remember one.
Yeah, that would have sucked if you would have hit him. His eye would have been blackened.
Yeah, blackened. Yeah. Anyway, I remember one incident with Merciful Fate is, while the concert hall for the Dynamo Club was relatively large, it wasn't it wasn't a huge hall, and there wasn't much ventilation. It was enough, but not really up to modern standards.
Now, is that the picture that you sent me where the DJ booth is on the left?
No. That's a
Okay.
cell. That's a layer.
Okay, sure.
Well, Merciful Fate is on stage, and the hall is filled into the last inch. You can hardly move your shoulders. Let's put it that way.
And that would be this stage, correct?
That is handicapped. That is
right. But is this the same stage you're talking about?
That's the stage I'm talking about. That's exactly. Okay. This is the concert hall, the original Dynamo concert hall with seen Exodus and Slayer and you name it, Testament, Vicious Rumors, Agent Steel, Handicapped. My band used to be That's Me with the Breath. That's during the song Food Fight, where I would throw food into the crowd.
But, actually, speaking about Handicapped, because I had a question, and since you mentioned them just now, I needed to get a translation from you. What is Badmuts?
Yeah.
Badmuts.
That is a bathing cap.
Oh. That makes the song even better then.
Yeah, and our fans used to come to our gigs with a bathing cap on.
That's great.
Yeah, so you had a hall of 200, 300 people all wearing bathing caps in all colors, and we used to throw them in the public as well. So for those
that's fantastic.
Yeah, and they used to come also in bathing clothes, and with a rubber duck, with a lifeguard, what you could, with a duck on it, and they would jump off stage diving with a rubber duck and with a Badmuts with a gap.
That reminds me of the first time I ever saw. Do you know Municipal Waste?
Who?
Municipal Waste.
Oh yeah, sure. British.
So no, they're not British. They're from the U.S. Oh, but they're like a crossover thrash hardcore kind of sort of band. But they played at a little bar called Tasty World in Athens, Georgia, which is where I'm from, and this would have been 2005 maybe. And this is right after Hazardous Mutation came out, so their third album, if I remember correctly. But they had a song called Terror Shark, and people were stage diving and crowd surfing on like surfing boogie boards, and it with shark fins on their backs where it looked like sharks circling. It was great. When you said that with the shower caps and stuff, it immediately made me think of that.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah. So it was a crazy scene at the Dynamo Club, and it's where the first time I saw stage drivers, and where the first time I saw thrashing and moshing. But to finish my story about Merciful Fate, they had this huge wooden cross on stage, which they never had before. And during the gig, in the middle of the gig, again, the place is packed.
Now, what's the deal with that wooden cross? Are they bringing it with them, or are they asking you guys to build it for them before they come?
I had no idea what they were going to do with it. And then King Diamond looked at us and he said, "Do you know what's going to happen now?" And we looked at each other because, no, we didn't know. How could we know? And he asked it again, and still we said, no, we don't know. And then he said, "We're going to burn the Holy Cross." And he meant it. And he did. And that bitch of a cross is starting to smoke, Brent. It's smoke. And
no!
There were two doors to the outside, and within a few seconds, the complete Dynamo hall was empty, filled with smoke, coughing, except for maybe one or two very convinced satanic worshippers. But the rest of us left, and the cross had to be, with sprinkled with water and with some special equipment, because
like fire extinguishers and such.
Fire extinguishers and such, because that wasn't a really smart move. And of course, I never did that again at the end.
No, that's bad enough to do at an outdoor show, much less inside of a club.
I know. So that happened, and it was talked years later. Everybody was still talking about it, but it was a good stunt because it brought some notoriety and some publicity, which was good for the band. So and there was also a friend of mine, Erik de Haas, who immigrated to Brazil, where he runs Dynamo Brazil. It's a booking agency. He books especially Nightwish, for instance.
Okay, sure.
And he had a special car, a very old car. It was a wreck. It was a not a second hand. It was a 100-hand car. It was almost falling apart. And he painted like an upside down cross and Merciful Fate and Hail Satan. And the result was that when he was on the road, he was stopped by police every time, and people vandalized his car. And and there's a picture of the guys of Merciful Fate and his car in front of the Dynamo somewhere. I couldn't find it, but if I had found it, I would have shown to you. But yeah, and then later, the Dynamo Open Air Festival evolved in this huge festival. It changed location. And at one time, there were 100,000 people trying to come into the Dynamo Open Air Festival. And there were the traffic towards Eindhoven came at a complete stillstand for miles and miles and miles. Between Germany and Eindhoven, between Belgium and Eindhoven, when you wanted to go to Eindhoven, you couldn't move, because of all the people who wanted to go to the Dynamo Open Air Festival. And it was.
How many people were they hoping for or expecting?
Well, it grew per year. So
right, no. But you said the year that there was supposed to be 100,000 people. Were they expecting 100,000 people, or were they expecting 10,000?
50, 60 to 80,000 maybe, but
wow.
Not 100 to 120,000. They just couldn't, handle those crowds. It's almost it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
It became very well known, and the Dynamo Club, especially in the 80s, we noticed that later on we heard from Testament and Exodus and Slayer that they wanted to play the Dynamo because the Dynamo was known in the Bay Area. And of course we knew about the Bay Area. We read American magazines as well, of course. So I've been playing music at the Dynamo Club as a DJ until 1991, and then I quit because I started my study. But it was 10 years of going to concerts, partying. It was one big party.
Yeah, I mean, based on the stories you've told me, you've lived 1,000 lifetimes just in that 10-year period from when the Dynamo started to when you left. Just all the stories that you have, people that you met or shows that you saw or nights that you were DJing or whatever, that. I tell people I was born 20 years too late.
The perception of what a metalhead and a hard rock fan was like, because like I told you, in 81, before the Dynamo was founded, I was able to go in 2 or 3 bars at the Stratumsend, and after the first Dynamo Open Air, of which you just showed the video images, there were these 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 festival hard rock fans, and they all went to those, and of course they couldn't refuse them, there were too many. So, and afterwards, those bosses of those cafes and those pubs told each other, it wasn't really a bad crowd. I didn't know they were such good guys. And after that, I could go in any pub at the Stratumsend, where I previously was refused entry. Now I was welcomed, and
that's kind of the thing that I've learned working so many shows and such as I've worked over the years. More on the loading in, loading out kind of stagehand side of things, but I've done some door and such too. But regardless of that. Metalheads are typically the kind of the crowd you don't have to worry about so much. We kind of police our own. We're not causing problems. We're not getting into fights or anything like that. Yeah, there's outliers where it does happen from time to time, but it's very rare. So I find it funny that back when you were getting started and metal was kind of getting started, that you guys were shied away as kind of subhuman Neanderthals and all this stuff. You're going to cause problems, when really you were the exact opposite group of that. They just didn't give you an opportunity to show it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And after the Dynamo got established at the Dynamo Open Air, I know that in the police officers volunteered to go to the Dynamo Open Air first.
Because they knew it would be basically a night off.
Yeah. And they learned to appreciate the music.
Sure.
As a strange coincidence also, because when you hear the bands live, you start to understand and the vibe of the music and how they interact with the crowd and how the crowd is reacting and what kind of crowd it is and how they are behaving themselves. So the image of metal fans and hard rock fans in Eindhoven and later in the Netherlands slowly, but on a rather rapid tempo later, changed for the good, and people, we were better and more positively understood than ever before, which was
Sure.
of course a good thing. And as a reaction to Dynamo and all the bands that played at the Dynamo Open Air, there were also a lot of other bands, rockabilly, punk bands, southern bands. Suddenly Eindhoven bloomed with all kinds of new bands in all genres almost. So, and that is why the name Eindhoven Rock City was used in the 90s and the early 2000s. I don't hear it that much anymore. But Eindhoven for the 80s and later in the 90s and early 2000 was in fact the center of a lot of development in the Dutch rock scene. And partly, not completely of course, but the development of the Dynamo Open Air and the Hard Rock Cafe was part of that development, I think.
I don't want to, I certainly don't want to get into a tirade about it because I avoid politics, especially on my shows, and I try to on social media and such. But I do think it's hilarious that two free market guys who are against a lot of government regulation, if not all government regulation and such, are sitting here boasting about a club that was made possible by government grants and so on and so forth. And it's just like, well, again, damn it.
But again, Mike, before that, in 1980 and early 81, was playing his record in a private bar in Deurne somewhere. And, you know, there was a demand. And I'm pretty sure that some cafe would sooner or later, you know, discover this demand. And it would have been developed also. But
sure.
as it was, the people of the Dynamo jumped into the market to use this.
I suppose you make a good point there. The market was there, but this provided it before the market would have done so organically.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
okay. Fair point then.
Also, to this day, there are pubs now at the Stratumzand in Eindhoven and in other cities in the Netherlands as well that discovered the concept hard rock or rock cafe and are playing exclusively hard rock and metal at the Stratumzand. And in other cities, in Germany, in Belgium. I mean,
many of my favorite bars in the world, or I mean, not many, but three of my favorite bars in the world are all in the Netherlands. And and I guess a fourth, I hear so much about the Jack. I've not gone yet. I didn't have a chance to go, but and they are all exclusively hard rock / metal bars. You've got the Cave in Tilburg, which is amazing. You've got no, I'm sorry. The Cave is in Amsterdam, but it's amazing. Little Devil in Tilburg is phenomenal. I love that little bar. And
yes.
Then Excalibur in the Red Light District is also a fantastic place. So, you know, I think it's really cool because you don't really get that here. You know, there's Aces High in Salt Lake City, which is kind of a heavy metal themed concert venue / bar. You know, we had Station 4 here in the cities, but it's been closed now for 12 years. And it was mostly hard rock and metal. There were some things there that weren't, but it was by far and large hard rock and metal. I mean, their logo was an electric guitar. But it just seems like that's much more prevalent in Europe. You know, you've got Halford's bar in I forget where it is in Germany, but you know, it's a bar that's dedicated to Judas Priest and Halford. You don't get that here. So that is one thing that I enjoy about the European metal scene is when they go all in, they go all in.
Yeah, there seems to be an old farm cafe in the province, the Dutch province of Zeeland, where they play old school metal. And I know the Zechen in Germany is a concert versus cafe, hard rock metal cafe. There are many such places, especially in Germany, by the way.
Sure.
Old school metal is very. It's because of there's even a special festival for old school 1980s metal called Keep It True.
Keep It True is a great festival. I've never been able to go, but I very much enjoy watching what Oliver's put together and such. I follow him.
absolute fantastic festival, and the atmosphere there is absolutely. When you walk in, you're back in 1985 or something like that. And the bands who play there, the guys who organize tell the bands, we will only book you when you play music from the 80s.
Yeah, I follow him and his wife on social media, and there was a particular Keep It True that they put together. I want to say it was like 2 years ago, but it was the greatest NWOBHM lineup of all time put together. I mean, it was Savage, it was Elixir, it was Diamond Head, it was Saxon, it was Blitzkrieg, it was this, it was that. I was just like, wow, how can I get that here? Because we don't. I mean, we've got Hell's Heroes, which does a really good job of trying to bring in some of those bands and such. They've hosted Satan a number of times. They've hosted Raven, Saxon, and I know there's been several others. I've been trying to get them to get Avenger because I love Avenger, and I've never been able to see them. And
Gary Young, the drummer, is a very good friend of mine, who I, by the way, met.
He's become a friend of mine too. I like Gary a lot. Him and his brother. His brother's a nut. I love Sean.
Sean is absolutely fantastic as well. By the way, I met Gary Young for the first time during the so-called Dynamo Super Session, who was also a commemoration, but I can't remember what it celebrated. It must have been.
If you want to hold that thought, you can keep talking about it. I probably have some info on it. I know I do. It's just a matter of what it is.
Super Session was, of course, André Verhuizen had this idea of inviting members of Deep Machine, Satan, Merciful Fate, Brian Ross as a singer. But because
it was supposed to be Udo, and he replaced Udo at the last moment.
Yes, that's right. Because Fast as a Shark and another except
the track list, because I have a boot of it. It's Fast as a Shark, Sanctuary from Iron Maiden, I Don't Know from Ozzy, Crazy Train from Ozzy, Blitzkrieg, Paranoid by Sabbath, Son of a Bitch by Accept, which is my favorite Accept song, NIB from Sabbath, Children of the Grave from Sabbath, Restless and Wild from Accept, Rock and Roll Medley, and then Fast as a Shark again.
Yeah. So because Udo fell out and Brian was singing, but Brian won. He didn't know the Accept songs. And two, he didn't want to sing it because they were constantly high and it wasn't for him. So I was asked, not because I'm such a great singer, but rather because I knew all the lyrics, because I remember the lyrics phonetically. So after hearing 3 or 4 times in a certain song, I knew the lyrics. I could sing along. So they invited me to be part of the Super Session. So I sang Fast as a Shark, I Don't Know, Crazy Train, and Son of a Bitch. I believe 4 songs.
All right, so here I found it here in I forget what magazine it was in. Dutch Super Session on May 7th at the Dynamo in Eindhoven, Holland. Some of Europe's top metal talent were brought together for the first annual Super Session. Participating in this event were Brian Ross and Gary Young of Avenger, Andy Wrighton and John Wiggins of Deep Machine, and Steve Ramsey of Satan.
The guitarist Andy Wrighton and
John Wiggins.
John Wiggins is the guitarist I meant from Deep Machine. He was absolutely talented, very influenced by Randy Rhoads, and an absolute fabulous, fantastic guitarist. And it's a shame he didn't have more success because he was
he was in Battlezone as well.
Yes. But continue with the names because
Paul Diano and Udo Dirkschneider were to have appeared, but both canceled out at the last moment. Brian Ross was called just 3 days prior to the show. And then they basically just go through, there's other info here. The Entourage performed Accept's Fast as a Shark, Restless and Wild, and Son of a Bitch, Maiden's Sanctuary, Ozzy's I Don't Know and Crazy Train, Blitzkrieg's classic Blitzkrieg, and Sabbath's NIB, Children of the Grave, and Paranoid, which included Gary Young's drum solo. For the encore, the crowd was treated to an appearance by Timmy Grabber and Michael Denner of Merciful Fate on versions of Priest's Living After Midnight, Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll, including a rock and roll medley, a la Blitzkrieg, and Status Quo's Caroline, which I do not have those songs, unfortunately.
No, but it was pretty good. And I enjoyed myself really, really good. but I was living in 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 uh, uh, in some attic by people by which I rented a room. And later, after the super session, minutes later, I was in the dressing room talking to Michael Denner, and we were figuring out what our favorite bands was. And he knew, for instance, Michael Denner knew Max Webster. Just and I invited him to my home. But what I didn't realize, what I didn't notice, that there were other people, all the members from the super sessions, Timmy Grabber and Gary Young, and all of them were listening to our conversation. And I gave Michael Denner my address, and I gave, in fact, my address to everyone else in the room. So the next day, not only Michael Denner was at the place, but everyone. 15 people. That wasn't on itself not a problem, but the people who owned the house where I was living in, where I was renting the attic, were not there. Only the nephew was there. And what happened, and at first I didn't notice because I went upstairs to the attic with Michael Denner and trying to talk with him. But after a while, I hear all this noise, and I think, what the hell is going on? So I go downstairs, and the nephew is all seeing it, and there were people in the living room of the people who owned the house, and they were in their refrigerator, and they were all drunk and dancing in the garden and squashing the flowers and the plants, and the place was a complete mess. And I had to kick them out, but I was too late because within a few days I got a letter from the owner of the house who kicked me out. So I was politely but urgently left to leave the place. I had to look for a new place, which I found within 24 hours or so. A much better place, very near to the center. I could walk to the Dynamo. It was even better than that place. So it wasn't really a disaster, but it was a night I will never forget. I tell you that.
Sure. And just as a quick aside, the Dutch Super Session blurb that I just read, that was out of Whiplash magazine, which was
Could you send a picture of it to me for the article, I mean?
Yes, I can absolutely send this over to you. One thing I would like from you as well, so I can share it. I'll share it on the socials and such. This show's social as well as the Satan socials. I believe it was in the New Wave of British Heavy Metal Soundhouse group. I had showed a picture of that poster, and you posted a ton of photos from that night or the time around it. I would like to have all of those photos in one place if it's possible for you to send those over to me. I'd like to post them with some context. I'll give you credit, of course, and such, but there were some really cool photos there.
Yeah, I have to thank Erik Veenstra. I will talk about him later.
Okay.
Who provided me with the pictures, but he didn't make the pictures because he is in a lot of those pictures. But he provided me with the pictures, so I have to thank Erik Veenstra.
Okay. Well, kind of where I'm at right now, we're at 1 hour and 12 minutes. I think we're going to have to do this as a two-parter just because there's so much more to go with. And I don't want to just cut it off now and leave the rest of the story untold. So is there anything else that's pertinent to what was being talked about today that needs to be said now versus waiting for a part two, where you start to kind of cover more kind of what happened maybe a little, maybe towards the tail end of the movement, and then more into some of the later years of your DJing and such there, and other things that you may want to throw in during that one. Is there anything else that needs to kind of be tagged onto this one?
I don't know if it's interesting for your listeners and viewers, but maybe some of the story of Handicapped.
Why don't we get into that on the second one? Because I think that fits more into the time period of it, is my understanding.
No, at this time, no.
Okay. Was there anything else that needs to go on today then?
Sorry?
Is there anything else that needs to go on to this episode today with the topics that we've been going on with?
As far as I know, at this moment.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want this to go 3 hours because the way that we're going right now, it will, and I'm going to enjoy every bit of it, but getting everyone else on board to watch it, I'm trying to keep these less than an hour or right at an hour if I can help it, just because attention spans suck, and I'm not Joe Rogan, so I can't do a 4-hour podcast and keep everybody engaged. But no, I've greatly enjoyed this. I heard the party story when I was in Eindhoven, and I mean, you saw me laugh at it again. It's a great story. So I want some more stories like that on the second episode, because you had a bunch of them, some pranks that the Merciful Fate guys were playing on each other, and so on and so forth that you were talking about. So let's wrap it up here with this one, and I'll have you back on again here pretty soon to do the second one. I know that Jarvis wants to come on sometime after the 2nd of November. I think he's on tour right now, or at least maybe in London, because I know he spends a bunch of time in the UK as well. And then another fellow Dutchman of yours, who I don't think you know, I mentioned him to you, Frans de Vries, which I'm probably not pronouncing his name well at all, but he was at some of the Dynamo Satan shows and such, and has been a massive Satan fan since the beginning. He's on holiday right now, but he wants to come on soon, because just having been there, where I've not been to the UK, so I can't speak to the new wave of British heavy metal in Newcastle or anywhere else that it was kind of taking the country and Europe by storm, but I can at least speak to people that were there, and having been to the Netherlands myself now twice, I can kind of immerse myself into these stories a little bit, because with as much as you're talking about the Dynamo, yeah, I've not seen the building that you're talking about, but I know where the Dynamo stands now, and I've at least been in Eindhoven and can kind of wrap my head around some of this. So I'm really enjoying hearing these stories, and you're a great storyteller. So I'm confident that anyone watching and listening will be able to enjoy them as well.
Hope it's interesting. It has been interesting enough for your viewers.
Well, I mean, you kept me engaged for several hours when we were hanging out in Eindhoven. So I never once got bored of the conversation at all. I thought that it was very engaging. So that's why I want to do it again, because I know you're full of many more stories and you're a good storyteller. So, but until then, I'm going to sign off now for this, and we'll do it again soon. I'm going to try to come back in maybe 2 weeks. I was thinking about maybe wanting to do this as a weekly show, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I'm thinking every 2 weeks to a month, I'm going to put out a new episode, or else I'm just going to run out of content eventually, because there's only so much about the band that I can cover, or about the greater new wave of British heavy metal. So I want to keep it interesting and not overload everyone, because, as it sits now, I have so many podcasts that I listen to. It's really hard to add a different one into the rotation. So I imagine that there's a bunch of other people out there with that same problem. So I appreciate you all for tuning in. You know where to find me now on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and such. You can look for me on Instagram. It's Hellbrent for Leather. You can find me on Facebook under Casting the Act, and same thing with the YouTube, which is where this is found. If you're watching it, you already know where it is, but tell your friends, like, subscribe, so on and so forth. And I greatly appreciate your time and listening. So until next time.
Thank you.